everyone, in this week's video, I'm going to be sharing how you can make some pork bone broth and how you can preserve it. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, this is Corrie from This and That, and welcome to my channel. If you are new here, thank you so much for taking the time to check out one of my videos, and if you are one of my returning viewers, I really appreciate you coming back to check out another video. So with Easter right around the corner, people might not know what to do with the bone in your spiral ham. You can use pork bone broth just as you would chicken or beef for soups and stews and things like that. Rice is really flavorful and it's really simple to do. I'm going to be doing it in my slow cooker, and you can also do it on the stove as well, but this particular video I'll be sharing how to do it on the slow cooker. I'll also be canning mine at the end, but I'll also tell you another way that you can preserve it as well. So let's get to cooking. So here we have the bone from a ham, which I'm going to use to make the pork bone broth. I also in my freezer keep scraps like celery and onion skins and things like that. So that way when I make bone broth, I've already got some of this, and these were things that normally somebody would throw away, and you can use them in your bone broth. So I'm adding about 8 cups of water because I want to cover the bone and the meat that's left on the bone. So that's what I'm doing here. And next I'm going to add, this is pretty much just the tops of celeries, like the leaves, and this gives it some great flavor. And these are things that many people just throw away. And I keep these and use them for my bone broths. This is all onion skins and onion chunks that I've saved from using onions. I also added some fresh onion as well. And I had some carrots left over from a birthday party, so we washed those and scrubbed them and put those in as well. I also added some peppercorn. I did not add salt because the meat is already pretty salty as it is. And then I'm also going to add some minced garlic. You can use fresh, you can use from the jar, whatever works for you. And then lastly, I'm going to add 2 bay leaves. I'm going to cover this up and I'm going to cook this on low for 12 plus hours. Here it is about halfway through. This is at the 6-hour mark. And finally, here it is at the end. I did mine about 14 hours. The longer that you cook it, the better the flavor is going to be. So try to do at least 12 hours if you can. And you can see the meat just fell right off the bone. So there's some delicious pork that is in here that I will take out and use for a later meal. But what I'm going to do is I have a steamer basket over an 8-cup Pyrex measuring cup. And I'm going to take out all of the solids, and that way the broth will drain into the bottom. And of course, I want to get every little last bit of broth. I'm going to let that drain out. And then I'm also just going to stir it up a little bit so that any broth that might have gotten trapped in the solids does drain down into the bottom. I'm going to transfer this into a bowl and ladle it through a strainer, a very fine strainer. I like doing it this way, just ladling it in, because I like having pouring spouts, and unfortunately I don't have enough large containers with pouring spouts, so sometimes I just have to ladle it into something different, but this works. I'm going to run the broth through this fine strainer 3 times. I don't know why, the number 3 just works good for me. I find that if I do it once or twice, it just doesn't get enough of the solids out of the broth. 3 seems to be the magic number with this particular strainer. If you have a finer strainer, you might only have to do it twice, or if you have a super fine strainer, you might only have to do it just once. But with my particular strainer, I will strain it 3 times just to get any remaining solids out of it, because I want it to be just broth. And here again, I'm just going to repeat the process. I'm straining it a second time by pouring it from the glass bowl into the metal bowl. And then I will ladle this again from my large metal bowl and into my 8-cup measuring cup. And I'll be happy to link the measuring cup on Amazon. It is a little bit of an expensive purchase, and I was really lucky and a friend gave this to us. And I cannot tell you how many times I use this thing for broths and soups and all sorts of other things, and it's really paid for itself if I would have had to buy it myself. Here it is in the fridge. It's going to cool down. I'm going to take off the fat from the top, and I'm going to save this fat because I am going to actually cook down some of the fat that I saved off of some cuts of meat that we had, and I'm going to make a small amount of lard. And now I'm going to warm up the broth because I'm going to can it. I'm going to pressure can my broth so that way it is shelf stable and I can have it whenever we need it for meals. So I've got it to just under a boil here, and what I'm going to do is ladle it into my mason jars. I'm using pint-sized jars, and I've already cleaned these with hot water. I'm going to put a disclaimer here that you should do your own research when it comes to canning. There's a lot of different opinions about canning, and I'm certainly not an expert, so I always invite people to do your research when it comes to canning. The recipe that I use to make this bone broth is pretty much the same recipe that I would use if I was making chicken broth or beef broth. The only difference is that I'm using I used a pork bone instead of chicken bones or beef bones. So just make sure that if you are going to can your broth that you do find a recipe that you are comfortable using. I am going to pressure can it. And the other way that you can preserve this is if you check out one of my other videos. I will link a card in one of the corners and link it in my description box. But you can also freeze this bone broth as well. You can put it in the refrigerator, let it get cold, skim the fat, and then take it and ladle it into 1 cup or even 1.5 cup, whatever plastic containers you have that are freezer safe. You can freeze them overnight and then pop them out of the container, and you can put them in freezer bags and then use them just like you would this broth, only it's going to be frozen instead. But I'm running out of freezer space, so I decided to can my broth, and I've been on a canning spree. You will see with some of my other videos that I start sharing, I've been canning beans and all sorts of other things. Here I'm just making sure I have 1-inch headspace before I clean the tops of my jars and then put on my lids and my rings. Here I'm just taking a clean, damp cloth and I'm getting anything from the top of the jar just because I don't want my lids to not seal properly because there might be some food debris on the top. And now that these are wiped, I'm going to add my lids. The lids I put in boiling hot water, and I like to do it this way. This is the way somebody had taught me, and it softens up the rubber around the ring. There's a lot of people who don't do this and they get seals just fine. I've always done it this way since I've started canning, so I'm going to continue to do it this way because it takes like 2 seconds to boil some water that I'm going to be using for most of my canning recipes anyway. Next, I'm going to twist on my rings finger tight so that way the lids stay on. I don't want to put them too tight because if I crank them on too tight, the lids could buckle under pressure in the pressure canner. And I use a Corrie electric canner. There's a lot of people who have opinions about pressure canning, that you should only be using a stovetop pressure canner. Unfortunately, I have a glass stovetop that is not rated for pressure canners, so I bought one of these and it has been a godsend. I invite you to watch Rose Red Homestead's videos about electric canners. She has done the Nesco, which is also the same as the Corrie, and she's also done the Presto canner, so you can see her scientific experiments. She has a device that she puts inside to see what the temperature gets to and how long it stays there. It helped me decide to buy one of these, and I'm really glad I got one. The only downside is you can't fit a lot of jars inside. I can fit 5 pints or 4 quarts. You can also fit a bunch of the smaller jars, but you do have to use the wide mouth. Some people don't use it, but I find the wide mouth works really well with this canner. And here they are out of the pressure canner, and they came out really great. So here's the fat that I saved, that I trimmed off of a bunch of the meat that we had left over, and I put this into my slow cooker and I put it on medium. And what I'm doing is I'm melting down the fat so that way I can make some lard. And here's the fat that I saved, that I skimmed off of the top of the bone broth, because I like to use as much of something as I possibly can. This is stuff that most people would just throw away, and I like to save this so I can have some lard, so if I want to cook something, I get some extra flavor in my chicken or my beef, and I get that nice bacony flavor. So I'm going to scoop out all of the solids, and then I am going to drain out the liquid fat that's in here, and I'm going to strain it through a very fine strainer. I didn't think there was going to be that much fat when I did this, so I got a very small jelly jar thinking, oh, this'll be just fine. And as you see, it ends up being a little bit on the small side, so I ended up putting it into a 1/2 pint jar, and I got just a little over a 1/2 of a jar of lard. And that's fine with me. I mean, it's actually, by the time next week rolls around, I'll probably have used it all, but again, I like to just use every little bit of something that I possibly can. And the ham bones were free from a dinner that we went to. We came home with a whole bunch of ham that was left over, and they asked us if we wanted a ham bone, and I said heck yes, because this is an opportunity to make more good things for my family to eat. So as you can see, the jar is just a little bit on the small side, so I'm going to add this into a larger jar. So like I mentioned, the jar was just a little too small, so I'm just transferring it into a 1/2 pint jar instead. So here is my liquid fat, and this will turn a white color. There are ways to purify this a bit more, but for what I'm going to use it for, I really don't need much more than this. So here it is. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, I hope you will consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to my channel. I'm trying to do more videos of this nature as I kind of video log my journey into doing some urban homesteading and trying to be more self-sufficient. And I know a lot of people in these trying times where we're trying to save money and just use up everything we can and do things really cost effective. Hopefully these types of videos are useful to someone out there. As always, my friends, stay safe and be well.